Hi everybody, it's Courtney from Dandelion Branding and welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to be talking about something that most e-commerce store owners should be aware of, and that is conversion rate. If you haven't heard of this term and you're running an online store, then you should definitely go check out our other video that talks all about certain metrics that you should be tracking, because this is definitely one of them. Conversion rate is essentially the rate in which users are completing an intended action on your store. So it is comparing the total number of people that are visiting your site, your store, your landing page, whatever it may be, and then comparing that to the number of people that actually took that action. So you're basically seeing whether or not the page that you've built is effective in driving sales. But it's easier said than done. So in today's video, I'm going to be going over the top 5 reasons why your website may not be converting and how to address those and solve them so that you can start bringing in those sales. So the first reason is probably the biggest, I would say, and that is if you have an unclear call to action or CTA. And this could play out in a couple of different ways. It could either be an overall sort of website issue in general, or more specific to the landing page or the product page. So a call to action is just that. It is the main action that you want your user to take, and you're presenting it there on your web page. Typically, this is an add to cart button or an email subscribe if this is like a lead generation opt-in page. So the call to action would be that button, them actually putting in their personal information, clicking subscribe, or clicking add to cart and completing that order. But oftentimes when we're building a page, if we're really in it, it can be hard to see that we're perhaps creating some confusion. And I tend to see this in sites that are actually attempting to make things more clear for their customer, but in fact, they are making it a bit more confusing by putting a lot of information on your product pages and driving people to learn more here or to watch this video about this product here. You're really making it challenging for that user to know where they're supposed to look. Where are they supposed to focus their attention? And if they're led off of this page, then the chances of them coming back are very, very slim. So we really want to be quite thoughtful where we're putting these calls to action so that they are the main focus. They're the main highlight of that particular area of the page. And another thing that we see often, it sounds simple, but you would be surprised, is that the call to action buttons need to be a color that stands out, or at least have some sort of a hover color or border or something that allows the user to see them. We quite often see call to action buttons that are not dark enough. They don't provide enough contrast from the background, and it makes it quite challenging to see, especially if you have any users that may be visually impaired. It is particularly difficult to see colors that don't have a lot of contrast. So that's definitely something to be aware of when you are designing your pages. Even if your brand color might be like a light pink, we really encourage you to perhaps add maybe a darker pink, a darker, more gray, or something that could still go with your brand colors, but offers a little bit more contrast so it is more easy on the eye. So in order to really address the issue of an unclear call to action, you want to be building your page with the overall goal in mind. What action do you want these users to take? What is the most important thing? Is it that you want them to sign up for your emails? Okay, well then you should make that front and center, and not the FAQs, and not a video all about you. Those things are still great to have on a landing page, but they shouldn't be front and center, and they should not be taking up sort of visual hierarchy from that main call to action. So creating a visual distinction for your call to action and ensuring that that call to action is more bold than other items on your page. Those are two ways you can definitely help address this issue. Another reason that pages may not be converting is if there is just either too much text or too many images. And I've seen both, and both are kind of equally tough for the user for different ways. Too much text is going to be a little bit boring. It might be too much for the user to want to read, and they just glance right over it, can't even see what you want them to see, and they won't get the main point. Product pages are not where you should be having your long form copy. Long form copy is great for blog articles, for some perhaps social media posts, for guides, for more in-depth educational content. Your product page should more or less contain a more concise version of that long form copy. Of course, it is possible to add a product story or something on a product page, but that should not come before the add to cart or the call to action. So along those same lines, a product page that has way too much imagery or is trying to be way over designed can be problematic. Sometimes these images don't load on certain devices, or they load slowly or choppy, and people do not have a huge attention span these days. We do not have a lot of patience for website load time. And so that will significantly affect the user's interest in wanting to stay on this page. It will definitely impact your overall conversion rate and will most likely lead to that user just leaving the page and bouncing. Though imagery is incredibly important for a product page, it's really something that should be used intentionally and thoughtfully. There does not need to be massive images, graphics, moving items. That may cause a lot of problems. There are certainly ways in which this can be done, absolutely, but if you're just starting out, I really urge you to keep it simple. Product images are incredibly important, so definitely feature them. Don't attempt to try to sell a product without having any photos. A variety of photos is also great, right? The product images alone, product images with a person, perhaps in being used, things that show the product actually in use by a person are definitely great. But just be conscious of the overall image size, and be sure that you're testing your site on all devices to ensure that things are loading properly and not slowing your site down too much. And in terms of copy, just be really thoughtful and work your hardest to try to come up with really nice, concise ways of creating a product description. Also, definitely work on trying to come up with top key features for that particular product rather than going in depth on the product page in particular. If you have an in-depth article, you can certainly link it somewhere on the product page. Would not recommend doing that in the product description above the add to cart button. But later on down the page, you can definitely link folks out. For the most part, we will want them to stay on that page though. So be as thoughtful as possible when linking folks out to other educational information, because ultimately, again, what's the goal? It's for them to add that to cart. It's not necessarily for them to be getting that education right now. you will want to provide that to them in other ways, and hopefully that would happen prior to them arriving at the product description page. So the overall moral of the story there is keep your product pages quite simple, concise, and clear. Be aware of load times and mobile responsiveness, and also try to limit the amount of links on your overall product page that are taking users away from that page. And this leads me to my next point, which is another reason why your pages may not be converting, and that's because there might be distractions in the overall journey of the customer. And what I mean by that is, let's think of how these customers are interacting with your brand and how they're actually landing on that product page. Chances are they're seeing some other type of content, something else. Maybe it's a social media post, maybe it's a blog post, maybe it's an ad. They're looking at that, they are interested, and they're clicking through and heading to your website or to that product page specifically. When a user is this engaged and is this ready to make a purchase, we want to focus that energy and attention on the overall goal that we want them to complete, which is most likely signing up for emails or making a purchase, right? And by adding in external links, videos that they can click on and go check out our YouTube, go check out us on Facebook or on Instagram, check out our Pinterest. All these things are great. It's great that your brand is available on all of these channels, but during the customer journey of actually going from that advertisement, that piece of content, to making a purchase, we should make that process as streamlined as possible. It should be simple, it should be clean, it should be easy, and we want it to be cohesive throughout. Adding in a bunch of pop-ups or distractions, or hey, what about this offer? What about this? What about this? Hey, what about spin the wheel, do this game? It doesn't really help. In fact, it will be, again, quite distracting and can be kind of off-putting for some users. So definitely be conscious of how you are setting up. If you do have pop-ups, they can certainly work, but be conscious of how those are displaying. Perhaps hide them on landing pages if you can. We highly recommend doing so. If you have product pages, also perhaps attempting to hide your pop-ups from showing on those product pages would also be beneficial. You really want to limit any sort of distraction so that instant where they were like, yeah, this is a good product, I'm going to click to go to this website and check out more, you want to keep that momentum going. And anything that will get in the way will get in the way. The fourth reason that your site may not be converting is an overall lack of trust on the customer's end. A customer needs to trust you as a brand before they're going to grab their wallet and enter in their credit card information into an unknown site. That requires a level of understanding and trust. Anything that you can do to really encourage that trust, like being very clear about any sort of policies you may have, a money-back guarantee, a return policy, having information on your product pages that describes what credit cards you accept or what payment gateway you use. There's certain things called trust badges that if you're utilizing certain software that's compliant with safety protocols, then you should display that. Subtly, of course, should not be your selling point at all, but it is certainly something that should still be there. So that's sort of the more obvious side of gaining a customer's trust. But more subtly, there are things on a site that just oftentimes look really sketchy. So be very thoughtful of how your images are displaying, making sure that the resolution looks right, that things aren't grainy or weirdly stretched. Ensure that you have your logo there, ensure that you have information about your brand. Who are you? What do you do? Who are you as the business owner specifically? I think having information about you and your team is really, really beneficial in terms of building overall trust, because you're humanizing your brand. So a lot of the trust that the user may feel for your brand is actually really kind of subconscious. It is not necessarily going to come from those trust badges or that 30-day money back guarantee. Those are nice, and that's good to have just for overall kind of, feeling secure and making that purchase. Your credit card number is not going to get stolen. But actually creating a bond with the customer happens elsewhere. That happens on your social media, that happens in your blog, that happens in, or whatever content that you might be creating. It happens on your homepage, the other pages on your website that are providing information about this world of your brand. And if you don't have content yet that's tied into your products, I highly, highly recommend thinking about that and working on adding some type of regular content that you're creating that is connected to the products that you're selling, and of interest to the customers, the same group of people that may purchase your product. You want that same group to be interested in what you're putting out there. So this is where audience research comes into play. This is where content strategy and really thoughtfully testing certain types of content really becomes important. And that process does take time, but if you're in this game to actually create a brand that lasts, this is a step that you cannot miss. Last but not least, the fifth reason why your site may not be converting is if you have bad product descriptions or just overall confusing language. And this is one I definitely wanted to include because I see it all the time. And it's something that we've actually been victim of. I say victim kind of sounds like we weren't the ones doing it, but we fell victim to the issue of having somewhat unclear language, because if you are an expert at something, or if you are so enthralled and so involved in the product and the business that you're working on, sometimes it can be challenging to step back from that and actually be able to come up with copy that can speak to the general public. And so we see this often with service providers where their sites can be filled with a lot of high-level jargon that makes sense to you as a professional in that particular industry, but as any old person on the website, if they just land on your page, it isn't going to be super clear and it's not going to make a lot of sense, and that's definitely not going to be effective in converting that user. So you really have to be thoughtful of how you are describing what it is that you do, what it is that your product is, what makes your brand different, and overall just the benefits of what it is that your brand is bringing to the table. And you have to communicate about these things in layman's terms. It just has to be. Unless you are a B2B business where you are not interacting or selling to the public at all, that's a different scenario entirely. But if you are direct to consumer, or if you're working with small business owners or people that are newer to the industry that you're working in, then you should be really conscious of the wording that you're choosing so that it actually makes sense to people who are not in it and working in it 8 hours, 10, 12 hours every day. Because what makes sense to you does not necessarily mean it will make sense to the next person. So highly recommend when you are building a website to have another person there, perhaps someone slightly older, to take a look at your site and to make sure that they understand what it is that you're trying to say. Ideally, having someone, even particularly in your audience demographic, taking a look at your site. That would be ideal. There are websites that can do this. Usertesting.com is one that is extremely helpful if you are launching something new and you want to get some real feedback on users' interactions and overall thoughts of your site. This has also traditionally been done with focus groups and things like that, but that's sort of for larger companies who are making sort of larger structural changes. If you're just creating your first website, then having a friend or family member who is less familiar with your overall industry take a look at your site and make sure that they're understanding at least the key points, because that's really the most important thing. We don't want your website to just be speaking to you as a business owner. You really need to be thinking about it and speaking about your products to your audience like a teacher. And it may be a sort of a reframing of the way that you think about your overall services. So definitely take some time in wording your overall site copy and specifically your product descriptions. We do have a video all about product description pages and what those should contain, so I will definitely link that as well. You can check that out to get our thoughts on that. But in general, you just want your product pages to be really clear and concise, to focus on key features, focus on benefits, focus on what makes you and your product better than the competition. That should be your main focus. Those should be the main drivers for what is making a user take action. So by including those in your product pages, you should be in the clear and should definitely start driving more sales. So again, the list was 5 top reasons why your site might not be converting: an unclear call to action, too much text or imagery, too much going on, distractions in the overall customer journey, roadblocks, right? An overall lack of trust in you as a brand, as the brand owner, and bad copy. So by focusing on those 5 things and really keeping those top of mind when you're creating your website or a new landing page, you will be on your way to creating something that is going to be really user-friendly and just overall something that is going to perform much more optimally for your sales. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out. I'll put our email and everything down in the description below so you can follow us on all of the channels, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.